Wah! The cries of an infant echoed in the dark bedroom. What's wrong, Olivia? Are you hungry? Did Emma wake up too? As one falls asleep, the other wakes up. Once both are awake, they both seek to be held. Since giving birth to the twins, there have been busy days with hardly any time to sleep, and my husband and I gradually lost weight. One morning, the intercom rang, and when I opened the front door with sunken eyes, two unexpected people were standing there. "You look like that early in the morning." "It makes me feel depressed. We came to pick on you because you haven't brought the kids over." Standing under the glittering morning sun were my scowling mother-in-law and sister-in-law. I, Joanna, am a petite 36-year-old, barely reaching 4'9". My husband, Stephen, is a company employee 2 years younger than me. My in-laws run a well-known local company. Stephen is a big man at 5'9", and his parents and sister are all over 5'6". When I go to their house, I feel like a little child. The kitchen is built to suit my 5'6" tall mother-in-law, and I can't help out properly. I am small and clumsy, always bustling around, which my mother-in-law and sister-in-law do not like. They always coldly tell me to sit down and not be in the way, pushing me aside. I want to build a good relationship with my in-laws, but I feel embarrassed and distressed because I don't feel useful. However, since there was no active intervention from my in-laws, there were hardly any problems. My husband is gentle and calm, so our marriage life was very peaceful. But after I got pregnant with twins, our daily lives changed significantly. Carrying twins is considered a heavy burden on the body, and as I am an older, petite woman with pre-existing conditions, the risk was very high, and the obstetrician expressed concern. "You might not be able to carry it to term. There might be danger to your health. Discuss it carefully together," were the despairing pieces of advice we received, briefly overshadowing our joy. My parents said, "Twins are a wonderful thing." They were surprisingly positive, but my in-laws and sister-in-law strongly opposed. "It's impossible for you to have twins with your condition. You should give up this time," they criticized me, and I returned home holding back tears. Even my husband was shaken by the doctor's words and almost gave up on continuing the pregnancy. However, I couldn't give up and couldn't choose only to save myself. Bracing for conflict with my in-laws, I convinced my husband to continue with the pregnancy. As expected, it put a great strain on my body, requiring hospitalization at 5 months into the pregnancy, and I didn't leave the hospital until after giving birth. During my hospital stay, neither my family nor my in-laws visited. Only my husband supported me every weekend. He would bring my favorite sweets and books, making our commonplace chats enjoyable. The managed hospitalization was hard and anxious, but I managed to endure because my husband supported me. When the time for delivery approached, I gave birth via cesarean section. Those small, 2 healthy girls were born safely. Holding the tiny bodies together with my husband, tears of happiness and relief flowed. Birth was not the end, but a new beginning. I began to feel the difficulty of raising twins. My newborn daughters, Olivia and Emma, slept well for the first 2 weeks. However, afterwards, they began to cry relentlessly, whether in the middle of the night or early morning. While one was nursing, the other would cry, and while changing one's diaper, the other would have a major bowel movement. As I was dizzy with busyness, the pressure to protect these small lives gradually wore me down. My husband was cooperative, but since his workplace doesn't offer paternity leave for men, he could only help on weekends and at night. Even after being exhausted from work, he cared for the twins, always with dark circles under his eyes. There was no possibility of asking for more help. Despite this, I couldn't rely on my family. In fact, when my parents found out that I was having twin girls, they grimaced openly and said, "You should give birth quickly and make a boy next time." I was stunned by their unbelievable words. I had never imagined that my family, who were happy about the twins, would suddenly change their attitude just because of the gender difference. As I stood there speechless, my mother spoke to me very kindly. "When I gave birth to you, my mother-in-law also had harsh words for me. My grandmother. I don't remember my father's mother, who died when I was 1 year old. Was I born amidst criticism from a grandmother I never knew? Why did you decide to have me? Well, we wanted to have a second child right away. It never happened, but my mother-in-law passed away soon after, and there were no problems." I see. Don't misunderstand. I'm giving you this advice because I'm worried about you, Joanna. It seems that the fact that the twins are girls made them feel that the birth was meaningless. The day after giving birth, my parents only came to briefly see the babies, and since then, there has been no contact. In such circumstances, it was impossible to ask my family for help with the twins because raising twins is difficult. Furthermore, as my mother pointed out, if my in-laws disliked the twin daughters, relying on them was also out of the question. In fact, they had been opposed to the birth of the twins from the start. After finding out the twins were girls, the only person I could truly rely on was my husband. With no one to turn to and sleepless nights continuing, both my husband and I broke down physically. One morning, just after my husband left for work, the intercom rang. Thinking he might have forgotten something, I opened the door, only to find 2 unexpected people standing there. "You look like that so early in the morning. It's depressing." "Oh, mother-in-law, sister-in-law." They stood there under the morning sun, frowning. As I stood dumbfounded, they walked into the room on their own. "What do you need?" "It's obvious. We came to nag because you haven't brought the kids over." My body froze with fear at my mother-in-law's harsh words. "I'm sorry. I haven't been able to manage the unfamiliar task of childcare." Of course, I was surprised by my sister-in-law's voice and inadvertently let out a sound. My mother-in-law looked around the room and the kitchen, sighing. "The room is a mess, and the fridge is empty. I'm really sorry. No need to apologize. I'm very sorry." Seeing me in a panic, my sister-in-law sighed. "Where are the babies?" Well, before I could respond, the cries of the newborns came from the bedroom. My sister-in-law gently picked up my daughters and pushed me into the bedroom, saying, "Useless daughter-in-law, rest here," and closed the door. I sat bewildered in the now empty room. What should I do? What can I do? Exhausted and still unable to grasp the situation, I couldn't decide whether to leave the room to retrieve my daughters or to remain quiet. As I pondered, the crying of my daughters stopped, and the room was enveloped in silence. In the quiet space, with no one around, I eventually fell asleep. I awoke to sunlight streaming through the west-facing window. Unable to tell if it was morning or evening, I looked around the room, and my heart skipped a beat at the sight of the empty baby beds. In a panic, I opened the door to find my sister-in-law feeding the twins milk, and my mother-in-law chopping vegetables in the kitchen, seeing me dazed. My mother-in-law frowned. "You slept well, didn't you?" I'm sorry. There's no need to apologize. It's a good thing. Wash your face and come sit down quickly. Dinner is ready." Yes, following my mother-in-law's instructions, I freshened up and sat at the dining chair. She soon placed delicious dishes on the table. Among them, I noticed ingredients that weren't in our fridge. As if drawn, I picked up the fork and brought a potato to my mouth. The warmth and the somehow nostalgic taste slowly warmed my body. It's delicious. Isn't it? My mother-in-law said shortly, with a visible smile. My sister-in-law was also gently watching the twins. We used the milk we found there. Thank you. Breastfeeding is good, but it's convenient to get them used to milk too. It makes it easier to leave them with someone else. Yes. My ambiguous response was met with a steady gaze from my sister-in-law. That's why you should rely on us when you're in trouble. Understand? I'm sorry. There's no need to apologize. As I shrank back, my sister-in-law sighed. Sorry, our way of speaking was too strong. As my sister-in-law tilted her head and my mother-in-law frowned, my husband just arrived home. He was surprised to see his mother and sister, but realizing that the situation was not bad, he felt relieved. Joanna, I'm sorry to have surprised you. My mother and sister were worried that we were having a hard time and couldn't wait any longer. What do you mean? Surprised by my husband's revelation, I was wide-eyed. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law looked awkwardly away. It seems that ever since I got pregnant with the twins, my in-laws and sister-in-law had been concerned about my health. Their opposition to the pregnancy stemmed from deep worry. They were genuinely afraid of the risk involved with me, being petite, giving birth to twins. They avoided visiting me to keep from stressing me and to avoid raising my blood pressure. They were aware that their words could come across as harsh and intimidating. However, the gifts my husband brought were all carefully chosen by my mother-in-law and sister-in-law to cheer me up. In retrospect, many of the sophisticated sweets included were unlikely choices for my husband to make on his own. During my pregnancy, they had prayed for safe childbirth. When I successfully gave birth, they were very happy, but because they had once suggested giving up on the children, they lacked the courage to visit. Still, hearing through my husband's calls that I sounded tired, they felt we were in trouble and came to help. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law are awkward but kind and compassionate people. Unbeknownst to me, I had always been loved and protected by them. Since becoming pregnant, I had been too overwhelmed to notice their care. Do you really, truly accept these girls? Even though I couldn't give birth to a boy. A boy? Whether it's a boy or a girl doesn't matter as long as they are healthy. We're women too, aren't we? My sister-in-law effortlessly dispelled the anxiety I had been carrying for a long time. More importantly, Joanna, there's something I need to discuss. Our mother, she actually hasn't held the babies yet. What? Wait, Susan. She thinks she doesn't have the right to hold them because of what she said. Mom. My husband looked sadly at his mother. My mother-in-law furrowed her brows and looked down. Seeing this, tears welled up in my eyes. She regretted telling me to give up on the twins more deeply than I could have imagined, even though her intention was originally to protect my life. I stood up from the chair and took one of the daughters from my sister-in-law. Please hold her, mother-in-law, but please. As I asked her sincerely, my mother-in-law hesitantly reached out her hands. Her large hands trembled slightly as they cradled the tiny body. She's warm, isn't she? Yes, she is. These little ones, they are alive, aren't they? Yes, they are. I'm so sorry, truly sorry. My mother-in-law grasped my daughter's tiny hand. Thank you for being born healthy. As her voice trembled, my tears naturally flowed as well. I regretted it. I had felt rejected and had distanced myself, which had nearly destroyed our relationship. I finally understood the importance of relying on others for my sake, for my children's sake, and for the kind people who cared about me. After that, I gradually began to accept support from my in-laws. It was memorable when my father-in-law first held my daughter and cried while apologizing. They were genuinely concerned about my health. No one in this house blamed me for having daughters. My sister-in-law, already the mother of 2 sons, supported me as a fantastic senior mom and advisor. My in-laws were so enamored with our babies that they often went shopping for them. Their tone is still harsh, but I understand that my mother-in-law and sister-in-law are busy with work and are striving in a male-dominated environment. If you think of their seemingly contrasting characters, they are quite adorable. When I'm bustling in the kitchen, they tend to chase me out, but that's their way of making sure I don't get hurt. You're cute like a little mouse. But it's scary because you might get stepped on, they said, which gave me mixed feelings. And then, 6 months after the twins were born. Raising twins is still challenging, but thanks to the support from my in-laws, things have gradually become more manageable. So, we decided to celebrate the twins' half-birthday. Naturally, we invited my in-laws, but my mother-in-law suggested, "You should invite your parents too," so we invited my family as well. I hesitated to reunite with my parents, but didn't want to waste my in-laws' kindness, and part of me wanted to believe in my parents. It felt like the misunderstandings with my in-laws had been resolved, and perhaps my parents' words were a result of my overly sensitive interpretation. However, it became clear that my hopes were mistaken. On the day of the celebration, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law prepared the food, and they gave matching outfits to the daughters. My father-in-law happily took turns holding the girls. Meanwhile, my parents brought nothing, just focused on eating, and showed no interest in holding the daughters. Towards the end of the party, my father made an unexpected remark. "So, when are you planning to get pregnant again?" What? The atmosphere in the room froze instantly. I was taken aback by my father's unexpected comment but scrambled to explain. "Dad, I'm overwhelmed with raising the twins right now, and it's said that getting pregnant within a year after giving birth can put a heavy burden on the mother's body. But that doesn't mean you can't do it. You're going to turn 40 soon. For Stephen's sake, you should have a son who can follow his father's footsteps." My husband frowned unhappily at my father's words. "I think having a boy or a girl is fine. Come on, you're a business owner, you have to think about the future, right?" Despite my husband's serious rebuttal, my father interpreted it as modesty and laughed crudely. "That's right." My mother just nodded along beside him. So it was as I feared. My parents looked down on me for not having a boy. Seeing me upset, my husband gently embraced my shoulder to calm me. "Father-in-law, Joanna has overcome a difficult pregnancy and brought wonderful daughters into this world at the risk of her life. My family and I don't expect anything more from her." Stephen, I was almost moved to tears by his firm words. However, in response to my husband's statement, my parents simply wore dubious smiles. "Stephen, a man needs to be more ambitious. You'll have your business taken over by your sister." "What? Your sister has 2 sons. If you want to inherit the estate or take over the company, you should seriously consider the future heir." At that statement, not only my husband's but also my in-laws' and sister-in-law's faces turned pale. At that moment, everything became clear to me. My father's insistence on having a son was not because he was concerned about me struggling in my in-laws' family. They hoped that my husband would take over the family business, and they expected our children, particularly a grandson, to inherit it. They were also scheming to gain their own benefits by using our situation. The shock that they might have welcomed my husband, because my in-laws are business owners, made my hands go cold. As everyone was at a loss for words due to my father's rude remarks, he said something even more shocking. "If the twins are a burden, I know the perfect person." He's a subordinate at my company, has a wife who is infertile, and they're looking to adopt. What? Even the usually quiet mother-in-law and sister-in-law stared sharply at my father. Are you suggesting we give Olivia and Emma up for adoption? My mother-in-law said in a deep, low voice. Yes, you also want a male grandchild, don't you? I'm sorry, but our daughter has failed. If we give up the twins, she'll quickly have a healthy boy. We don't want that. Right. Wait. What? I'm saying we refuse. My father thought his proposal would be accepted, but he was confused by the unexpected reaction. Finally noticing the angry expressions of my in-laws and sister-in-law, he let out a startled "oh" and shivered. How can you even suggest throwing out the babies? Unforgivable. My mother-in-law openly expressed her anger and reproached him. But if the eldest son doesn't have a male grandchild, that would be a problem for you, wouldn't it? Not at all. As long as our son and his family are healthy and happy, that's all that matters. But, however, be quiet. Overwhelmed by my mother-in-law's commanding presence, my parents shrank like frogs. My tall father-in-law stood up and looked down coldly at my shorter parents. Today we celebrate our grandchildren reaching half a year safely. This is not a place for you to satisfy your desires. If you are shameless and lack common sense, please leave. How could this? Joanna, you say something too, my mother pleaded, looking at me for help. There was no way I could defend them, knowing they intended to give away my precious daughters. Trembling with anger, I managed to shout back firmly, please leave. I cannot even think about giving away my daughters. Joanna, we are just worried about you. Just go home now. My sister-in-law, filled with anger, raised a knife that had been prepared for cutting the cake. My parents fled the house in terror. Silence fell, and amid Olivia's soft cooing, I thanked my in-laws. Despite having so much to say, I found myself at a loss for words. Then my mother-in-law gently enveloped my cold hands with her large ones and said, Joanna, what matters most to us is that the babies were born healthy and that you are safe. We are filled with gratitude to have 2 such lovely grandchildren. Mother-in-law, of course, if you wish to have more children in the future, we will support you fully. But there is no need to have more children if it strains you. We would rather you take care of your own health and stay well for the grandchildren. Do you understand how we feel? Yes, tears spilled over from the kindness of my mother-in-law's hands and words. While the shock and anger towards my parents ran deep, the support and genuine love from my mother-in-law and her family for me and my daughters felt incredibly reassuring. Now that the disruptions are gone, let's start again. Cake for the adults and strawberries for the kids. My sister-in-law said this as she placed a large cake in front of me. It was twice the size of the slice on my husband's plate. That's obviously favoritism. Of course. Joanna has been working hard every day with her first experience of parenting. And by the way, I need just as much. Raising a cute little devil of a 2-year-old. What are you talking about? My husband chuckled as my sister-in-law also placed a large slice in front of herself. The atmosphere at the table lightened, and I let out a sigh of relief. It's okay. No matter how terrible my parents are, I have people who support me. No matter what my parents say, I vow to protect my daughters. As my husband and father-in-law looked on, I watched my daughters happily eating strawberries. My parents stayed away from our house afterward and seemed to have given up on the idea of wanting a son. But one day, an unexpected event occurred. On a relaxing holiday afternoon, while my family was unwinding at home, the intercom suddenly rang. Checking the surveillance camera, I saw an unfamiliar man and woman. With suspicion, I opened the door, and they greeted us with smiles, stating their purpose for visiting. We heard from our supervisor that we could discuss entrusting your child to us. What? Seeing our astonished expressions, the couple looked equally surprised. As the conversation unfolded, my head heated up with frustration and disbelief. These people were referring to my father as their supervisor. They were the couple seeking adoption, mentioned recently by my father. In reality, my father had been trying to arrange for them to take my children without my permission, trying to contain my anger. I calmly explained the situation. The couple was shocked to learn about my father's misconduct. Apparently, they had been told that I was in poor health and unable to raise the twins. My father had tearfully told them that taking the twins would be for my health's sake. In reality, right after giving birth to the twins, he was pressuring me to quickly have a boy, I said bitterly. The couple looked embarrassed and uncomfortable. They were understanding people, and while expressing their disappointment, they offered words of consolation and left promptly. After they had gone, I told my husband everything, and he looked as fierce as a demon. The thought that such a person was his father-in-law was hard to accept. I wanted to go to my parents' house right then and scold them, but I held back. There was something else I needed to do. A week later, after discussing some things with my husband, it was my parents who, in a furious state, came to visit. "Why did you send my subordinate back?" "Because we never agreed to give the twins up for adoption." "I'm thinking about you. How can you do something so cruel?" "What cruelty?" I may have cursed in my heart, but I haven't done anything cruel in action. However, right then, my father angrily started to spill everything unilaterally. The subordinate exposed my father's extreme actions that I had told him about. Naturally, this shocked everyone at his company, especially those with children. They were furious. When they reported it to the company president, who loves his grandchildren so much he uses their photos as his phone wallpaper, he was so angry his hair stood on end. Not satisfied with just scolding my father for half a day, he continued to make snide remarks in front of everyone at the morning assembly. Since our town is small, my father's failure at the local company quickly spread among the employees. This misconduct was also communicated to the employees' families and neighbors, who secretly said, "That couple sacrificed the twins to make their daughter have a son. We were only thinking of you, Joanna. If you don't have a son, it will be difficult for you to stay with your husband's family. And yet, you repay our kindness with hostility." Are you still saying that? Haven't my mother-in-law and father-in-law said it's okay even if we don't have a son? You don't understand because you're naive, but to stabilize our family, we need a son who can follow in Stephen's footsteps. My mother, irritated, was biting her nails. If you truly cared about your daughter, you would prioritize her life over money, appearance, or public opinion. However, those blinded by money will not understand this logic. Instead, I told them a truth that would impact them the most. Stephen will not be taking over the family business. What? The successor will be his sister. Really? My statement made my parents go weak at the knees. That's impossible. There's no way her father would allow a woman to take over. It doesn't matter whether permission is needed or not. The company is owned by his mother. What? At my husband's response, they collapsed in shock. Indeed, the family company is not headed by my father-in-law, but by my mother-in-law, who is the CEO. A quick look at the company's website would show that the CEO is my mother-in-law, but it seems their deep-seated biases had blinded them to this fact. It is my sister-in-law who is working in the family business, while learning to succeed her mother. On the other hand, my husband is employed in a completely different industry. I asked him about it, and he has little interest in the family business, being fully committed to his current job, and has firmly stated he has no intention of taking it over. Therefore, there is no chance I will ever become the president's wife. Never. My goodness. My parents were left pale with shock. My mother covered her face with her hands and sighed deeply. I believed you would become a company president's wife, and I boasted about it to our relatives. What am I supposed to do now? I didn't know about that. And the Porsche. My father gasped in surprise, convinced that you would become wealthy. I used our retirement savings to buy the Porsche I've always dreamt of. I just remodeled the kitchen. This is my parents. Looks like we'll have to start saving from scratch again. Indeed, my parents trembled with despair, and my husband grabbed them by the collar and escorted them outside. Thus, at the age of 56, my parents were forced to start rebuilding their retirement funds again. Moreover, due to their disgraceful actions towards me and my daughters, which led to public condemnation, my father was forced to retire, overwhelmed by the situation. He wasn't worried about being fired, but about having spent all his savings and incurred debt on the assumption of a future inheritance I would receive. My mother has been a homemaker ever since I was born 36 years ago. As a result, living a secure retirement is now difficult, and their current livelihood is precarious. My parents tried to find new jobs, but no one would hire them. They even asked, through tears, to let them work at the company, saying, "Please tell your mother-in-law to let us work there," but were firmly rejected with, "We do not accept outdated sexists." While it was disheartening to see my parents in this situation, my husband and in-laws often cheered me up by buying my favorite foods. Being accepted and embraced by my new family gave me warmth. The twins grew up healthy, delighting us with their adorable smiles. Feeling proud of how I have endured the journey so far strengthens my heart. Even if my parents are in a difficult situation, I'm sure I can feel at ease being in this peaceful place. Half a year passed, and then, Dar. Hey, did you hear that? She just said Daddy Olivia just called me Dad, right? No, that was Grandpa Wright, Olivia. Yeah, Olivia is hungry. Look, Mommy will make you some delicious food. Goo, gwig. Wait, did she just say Grandma? My husband and in-laws laugh together while my sister-in-law casually joins in. The once intimidating in-laws are now utterly smitten with the twins, showing a much softer side. Today is the twins' first birthday. My sister-in-law's family is also here, creating a very lively atmosphere. For today, I used a recipe I found online to make a yogurt cake that even toddlers can eat. I spread strained yogurt on pancakes, decorated them with finger biscuits, the children's favorite strawberries, and a candle shaped like the number 1. My goodness, we're so lucky to have such a beautiful cake, my sister-in-law says as she pinches Emma's cheek, and Emma laughs joyfully. Olivia nearly reaches for the cake, climbing along my husband's arm. Being part of this joyful moment is deeply touching and makes me incredibly happy. This might even make me want another baby. Whether the next child is a boy or not, my husband and in-laws will love my children unconditionally. With such a trustworthy family, my life is sure to be fulfilling for many years.